Hello and welcome to BBC News. Let's start with that breaking news. It is an important development in the Ukraine war because President Zelensky has said that Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible. This is what he posted. Just a few minutes ago, he says he and his team are ready to work, under what he describes as President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. He says the first stages to end the war could be the release of prisoners and a truce in the sky and on the sea. If Russia does the same, President Zelensky regretted. He said the way the meeting in the Oval Office went on Friday, and that it was time to make things right. And he said Ukraine was ready to sign the minerals and security agreement. Let's go straight to Washington, straight to our correspondent Tom Bateman. And Tom, well, this is President Zelensky trying to put things right. I assume there hasn't been any sort of reaction there, but significant in terms of the climb. Down on just about everything. Well, I think there's some very significant language in that statement, not least mentioning President Trump twice, echoing really some of the talking points that Mr. Trump himself likes to emphasize. I think it's particularly notable that President Zelensky talks about the Javelin anti-tank missiles that President Trump had authorized during his first term for Ukraine. It's something he often talks about, and here you have Mr. Zelensky sort of echoing his gratitude for that as being a sort of key starting point, and saying that he is ready to sign this minerals agreement. Now he had said over the weekend that he was ready to sign it, and indeed clearly he was ready to sign it, when he came to the White House because they had organized this mutual or joint signing ceremony that was supposed to happen after a working lunch, after that meeting in the Oval Office, after which Mr. Zelensky was rather unceremoniously ejected from the White House. But here you have, I think, both in sort of tone and the specifics of what he is talking about here, an attempt to try to rebuild this after the intense pressure that the White House has been putting on, culminating in the form of President Trump last night deciding that he would cease or pause, in their language, military assistance to Ukraine. So a huge amount of arm twisting of President Zelensky going on here by the Trump administration. And this feels like the sort of first attempt at a response. The question, as you say, is whether or not it will be enough, I assume also. And it is an assumption that everything that the White House has announced about the pause would effectively stay in place until all of this has actually happened. Well, I think so, because clearly Mr. Trump is trying to use that pause as a way to leverage Mr. Zelensky to do what he wants. I have to say there are sort of two things going on here, and it's hard to know which the administration wants Mr. Zelensky to respond to the most. One is about signing the deal and about basically signing up to a quick ceasefire that Mr. Trump wants. But without security guarantees. Now Mr. Zelensky references that right at the end of his statement. He says he sees the agreement or the minerals agreement as a path towards these security guarantees. He was saying something a bit similar again on Friday. So it's not a radical change in the message he is giving. But I think the fact he's emphasizing that he will sign this without security guarantees at the moment, but still expects them or hopes for them and needs them in the future. But the other thing is about really the sort of emotive element of this. Remember, Mr. Zelensky was humiliated by the administration in the Oval Office. He was told that he was ungrateful, even though he has said thank you dozens of times to the U.S. over its military assistance, and told that he was disrespectful. So that adds another dimension to this. It's a bit harder to see if this will be enough and how he comes back from that. We had really more insults from key members of the administration towards Mr. Zelensky overnight, with Jason Miller, a key advisor to President Trump, referencing what he called Mr. Zelensky's tracksuit, saying that he needs to stop goof around. This was something he said overnight, saying that that behavior needs to stop. Also, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, talking about Mr. Zelensky, in the sense that he said he needs to basically sign this agreement and expecting him to sort of respect President Trump, say that he loves America. So, that element of things is a bit harder to determine because there's this huge diplomatic breakdown clearly, and they're sort of expecting some will see Mr. Zelensky to basically grovel to get relations back on track. So I have to see now, over the coming hours, we got this key speech in Congress from Mr. Trump tonight, how he responds to this. Tom, thanks very much as you were finishing that answer. We were seeing the pictures from the weekend with President Zelensky meeting Keir Starmer. Let me also tell you that the Prime Minister we have heard had a call with President Zelensky this afternoon. Downing Street said that more discussions and details are expected shortly, but it is safe to assume that comma used as the bridge to try to repair the damage of Friday, after that London summit trying to bolster European support for President Zelensky, but tried to repair the damage between Ukraine's president and America's president. So we wait for more details of that Downing Street call, but let's talk to Carl BT, who's the former Prime Minister of Sweden. Carl, welcome back to the program. Just your headline. Thought these are lines that have just come in the last 5-10 minutes. Your snapshot judgment on what you're hearing. Well, I mean, what happened, and in the announcement coming out of the U.S. is, of course, stab in the back of Ukraine, ceasing or pausing military supplies. The purpose or the aim is, of course, to weaken Ukraine so that Ukraine can then be forced into submission into demands coming from the White House or demands coming from perhaps a deal that Trump is going to do with President Putin. So it is serious. It's a stab in the back. The purpose is to weaken Ukraine.